All right, well, let's get into our Jewish journey through the Gospel of John. Now, well, we saw that Yeshua was flogged. We saw that a crown of thorns was placed around his head. And the Jewish leadership revealed their misunderstanding of who Yeshua is by saying that he made himself out to be the Son of God. That's not what the Gospels are teaching. That's not what the New Testament teaches. That's not what Yeshua did. He's not a man who makes himself out to be God. He is God who made himself man for our sake. And when we come to meaning of Son of God to the Jewish people, that meant King, Messiah, God's special regent. But to Roman ears, to Pilate's ears, it would have meant an imperial rival to Caesar. The Caesars, many of the Caesars were known as Son of God. And so Messiah, foreign concept to them, but they certainly understood a rival to Caesar. So we asked the question last week, have you chosen between friendship with Caesar, our society, our government, our world, the elite, or with God? Does your life reveal that loyalty? Whatever friendship you have chosen, I hope you have chosen friendship with God over the world. And are you more concerned about what others think of you than what Yeshua thinks of you? If you are more concerned about what others think, well, stop it now. I'm talking to you, right? What Yeshua thinks of you is of not only primary importance, but its importance makes all others' opinions pale in comparison. And they cry out, the Jewish leadership cry out, away. Now that's the same word as lift, to lift. And I think it's a nasty way of saying, lift him up, crucify him, not away with him. Crucify him, lift him up, get him out of here. Shall I crucify your king? And this is the condemnation that the Jewish leadership brings down upon their own heads when they say we have no king but Caesar. What? Most Jewish people would take umbrage at that. Every prayer that Jewish people pray begins by identifying God as King of the universe. The Jewish people do indeed have a king besides Caesar. It is God himself. And so the Jewish leadership reject God. They're not only rejecting God as their king, but they are rejecting any future Davidic Messiah, not just refusing to recognize that Yeshua is God's Davidic Messiah, sent their king, the legitimate king, sent over them. But the hope of any future Messiah, which is basically a wholesale rejection of the entirety of the Hebrew Bible, the hope that is strewn throughout the Hebrew Bible, God himself, let alone Yeshua, right before them. It is a complete and clear rejection. And so Pilate handed him over to the soldiers to be crucified. That's where we left it last week. Let's pick it up in the next verse. They took Jesus, therefore, the soldiers, took Jesus, therefore, and he went out bearing his own cross. This is the way it was done. Not an entire T, the T kind of cross that you see people reenacting today. No, just the cross beam, that was enough. The cross beam laid across his shoulders, and crucified, those who were condemned to be crucified, must march out of the city bearing their cross beam over their shoulders. And he's taken to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. Latin is Calvarius. So skull, Golgotha, Calvary, that's what it means, place of execution. Now, if you've been to Israel, and I know some of you have been with me, one of the places we showed you was the Garden Tomb, and you saw there this this hill that was identified in the 19th century, late 19th century, as Golgotha, because it looks like a skull. You can see the two eyes and a little nose, and that's what it looks like. This is what it looked like. You can see in the 30s, the black and white, and you can see it later on. It became a bus station, and because of the bus station being down and the fumes, it began to corrode the cliff face, and so what used to look like a skull doesn't really look like anymore. The nose has fallen off, the frontispiece has collapsed, but the traditional Protestant site is to place the crucifixion of Yeshua up there on that hill. Now, that's not likely the place. But likely is, you'll see this is a map of Jerusalem, and if you can make out number 7 right there on the top of the map, that's Herod's palace. That's where Yeshua is tried, and they march him through the city, take him out, and number 9, right there, the center of the top, number 9 is where he was crucified. That today, well, this is what it looked like in the time of Yeshua. It was outside the walls. It was a quarry with a garden, a good place and public place right outside the walls of the city to crucify someone. See, right there on the right side is the gate through which he would have exited, and they would have made his way to that site of crucifixion. It is protected today. It is the entire spot there is overlaid, much of it carved away and protected so that it survived by the tomb of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The two domes, one dome, the larger dome that has the tomb, and the smaller dome that has the place of crucifixion. This is a cutaway you can see on the right. Those of you who went with me to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you climbed up the stairs up to the rock of Golgotha. So much of it is cut away to preserve it. So destroyed to preserve. Don't ask me to explain. And the burial chamber, and they carved away all that rock, all that slope, and they created the site of Christ's tomb today. Point being, as the book of Hebrews says, verse 13, 12 through 13, therefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people, through his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So let us go out to him, outside the gate, bearing his reproach. Meaning, don't try to be comfortable within the confines of the city or society. Do not worry about the reproach of city or society or culture, because we bear the reproach of Messiah, and just as he must have been crucified outside the city walls, rejected by the city and the culture, so too we join him, bearing his reproach. Well, one thing that John leaves out is that perhaps Yeshua carried his crossbeam all the way near the gate of leaving this, but at some point, because of the beating that he took, because of that, the flogging, the scourging that he endured, he simply physically was unable to carry that crossbeam one more step. He collapses, and the Roman soldiers conscript a passerby, Simon of Cyrene. When they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, coming in from the country, and placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus. So he carried the cross on behalf of Yeshua because Yeshua was unable to do so. John leaves that detail out, wants to make John's emphasis is to show you very quickly Jesus is always in control, and even up to the cross. But here's this other detail that the other Gospels share as well. And there, outside the city walls, they crucified him. Now, the crucifixion in the Gospels, not just John, but throughout the Gospels, it does not go, no gospel goes into great detail as to what it meant to be crucified. There is no step-by-step. Some have more detail than others, but it's a very matter-of-fact, laid out story, and we get very quickly to Yeshua dying, his resurrection. That's the point. Get quickly to the climax of the story. But nonetheless, the reason that they failed to give those details, I believe, is because if you were part of Roman society, which everyone receiving the gospel in the first century certainly was, then you are extraordinarily familiar with every gory detail of what it meant to be crucified. And so they did not have to spell out what crucifixion meant. So we, however, are unfamiliar with that, and that's why certain films like Passion of the Christ, so important, because it really does fill in the details and makes it that's why it hits so many of us. These films hit us so viscerally, because it really is a horrible, barbaric practice, probably unequivocally the worst way that has been humanly devised to be executed. The most painful, drawn out, miserable, humiliating way. So there they crucified him, and we'll just go very quickly. This is an example of a Roman nail that was found from the first century, about 5 inches long. And on the other side, there is a Roman nail, and it is going through the heel. This is in the Israel Museum, has been found, the heel bone of a crucified man. And we see the nail. This is what's left of the bone and the nail. And we see the heel bone being pierced through by the nail. So many people for so many centuries would always tend to doubt the veracity of the Gospels, that, oh, well, this is absolutely exaggerated. The Romans didn't do these kinds of things, and Jesus wasn't crucified. People weren't being crucified that way. And most of the time when you see crucifixion, it's, well, they're tying them up with ropes and not nailing, certainly, through wrists and ankles. But here we have an example proving that all the doubters, the scoffers, are simply wrong. As the Gospels tell us, is exactly what happened. Then they crucified him, and with him 2 other men. Now, Luke gives us more details about the 2 other men. Actually, other Gospels do as well. John doesn't give us any details, simply detailing that he's flanked, 1 on either side. There's 3 that are crucified together, 1 on either side. We learn from the other Gospels these are insurrectionists, as Yeshua is identified as well, just as Barabbas, remember, was identified as an insurrectionist, a terrorist, not just a bandito, not just a robber, but they put Jesus in between, as befit his stature as king of the Jews. These are 3 crosses that are up in Israel right now, and they're not exactly representative, but they certainly do give us an idea, and they show you that, number 1, that the crosses were not elevated giant up in the air. They were maybe, your feet were maybe elevated by 2, maybe 3 feet at most off the ground. So all it took was a branch to be able to hit the mouth. So think maybe 8 feet up in the air is where your head is. Most of them are pretty low to the ground. You see the seat area where they are able to put some of their weight. It prolongs their agony, and you see the little cross piece on the bottom where their feet would be nailed as well. When you were crucified, you died of not just blood loss, but dehydration, but asphyxiation, and ultimately pulmonary heart failure, because your blood can't pump, your heart can't pump, you suffocate. You just can't get enough air, and of course that can take days to die. But Isaiah 53 prepares us for the death of Messiah, and we knew exactly 7 centuries before Messiah even came. Therefore, I will allot him a portion with the great, God's suffering servant. And he will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured out himself to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the transgressors. So we have the idea of suffering on behalf of others and being not just by himself, but flanked with other with those who actually were transgressors, even though he himself was completely innocent. Notice in 53:12 that it says that he will divide the booty with the strong, although he poured himself out to death. Well, I have to remind you that dead men divide no booty. And so there is indication in Isaiah 53 that although he will die, he will live again and be victorious. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Verse 19, Pilate also, don't forget about him, he also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. This is what's called the titulus in Latin. This is the title card, if you will. This was carried around the neck, generally, of the prisoner. It was contained their crime, what they were convicted of, and it's either carried by them around their neck or carried before them and then placed on the cross at some point. And on it was written, Jesus the Nazarene, his name, his birthplace, the King of the Jews, and the crime of which he is convicted. The King of the Jews, rival to Caesar, seditionist. So Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. And therefore, many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Yeshua was crucified was near the city, which we saw. It's right outside the city gates, a public place. And it was written, the title card is written in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Latin, Greek, or Aramaic, Latin, Greek. Either way, Latin is the official language of the Roman Empire. Greek is the lingua franca of most people, and Aramaic and Hebrew, these are languages that the Jewish people, the natives, would have understood. But remember, this is a time when pilgrims have come from all over the Roman Empire. It's Passover. And so every language is proclaiming that this individual who is being crucified is indeed King of the Jews. Whether it was accepted, whether it was sarcasm on Pilate's part, whether it was rejected by the Jewish leadership, nonetheless, objective truth is on that placard placed, Matthew tells us, over his head on the cross, nailed there, for all to see publicly. This is somewhat what it would have looked like. 3 languages, Hebrew and or Aramaic, and Latin and Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, they read it, they were happy that Yeshua was crucified, they got what they wanted. But Pilate could not resist digging them, and even though they had rejected Yeshua as King of the Jews, but remember how many times Pilate identifies Yeshua, saying more than he knew, that Yeshua was indeed the King of the Jews. And now the Jews, seeing this placard, they say, don't write King of the Jews, but write rather that he said, I am the King of the Jews. To which Pilate answered, too late. What I've written, I have written. Let me introduce myself to you. Hello, I'm passive aggressive. You put me in this politically untenable position, and even though I have tried to mollify you and to pacify you by crucifying your enemy, that individual you identify as enemy, I can't help but stick it to you one last time by identifying him right in your face, King of the Jews. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. That's in the original Aramaic. Now, this makes sense of what we know about Pilate. I mean, Pilate is not a good guy. He's a miserable tyrant. He's very, very weak. But let me just simply say, he's a politician. And need I say more? And Philo, Jewish historian, on the embassy to Gaius, 301, he wrote of Pilate, but when he steadfastly refused this petition, and here's where the action is describing Pilate, for he was a man of a very inflexible disposition, and very merciless as well as obstinate. Indeed, what we see in Pilate's final interaction here with the Jewish leadership. But remember the prologue of John, the first 18 verses. It prepares us for everything that we were going to encounter throughout the rest of the book. And in verse 11 and 12, we see that right there at the beginning of the book, it tells us how it ends. He came to his own, the Jewish people, but those who were his own did not receive him. Now, that was true of most of the Jewish leadership. It is also true of most of the common Jewish people. However, there was a significant number of Jewish people who did receive him, which is why we now justify this, saying those who were his own did not receive him, with the next verse, but as many as received him, because there were Jewish people who did receive Yeshua as their Messiah. If there weren't, none of us would be here today. There would have been no first century church if first century Jewish community did not respond, at least in part, positively to our Messiah. And as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. And John, remember, going way, way back over a year ago to our prologue discussion, John is telling you that the good news of the gospel is no matter how many have rejected Messiah, there have always been those who say yes to Messiah. And if you say yes to Messiah, you will be given, and those of you who have said yes, you have been given the right to become children of God. What does it mean to receive him? It means to believe in his name, in his authority, in his identity as the sent one, as the incarnate Word of God. If that is not your current position right now, I urge you to repent, by which I mean shuv, change your mind, turn around. If you have one opinion about Yeshua and it's not to recognize his identity as the Messiah, as the one who has given his life on our behalf, who can take away our sins, then shuv, turn, repent, change your mind, and don't delay. Today is the day of salvation. Back to our text. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Yeshua, and see, there's not a lot of detail about the crucifixion process itself, and of course, you can look that up on Google if you want. I mean, there's a lot of information in any Bible dictionary, encyclopedia, and of course, just plain old Wikipedia has a great article on what crucifixion was like. But then the soldiers, there's 4 soldiers who would have been assigned to the crucifixion of Yeshua. 4, little squadron. The soldiers, when they had crucified Yeshua, now they took his garment. Now, Yeshua is crucified naked. Now, we don't see it in the movies generally because of the sensibilities of the audience. But it is, imagine every bit of the public shame that is entailed with crucifixion, and now not even the shred of dignity of having a loincloth on. Now, there are some who will argue that perhaps the Romans recognized the sensitivities of the Jewish people regarding public nakedness, but the Jewish writings indicate even so that most people who were put to death were naked when they were put to death. Only some were covered, so maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But nonetheless, they took his outer garment. Loincloth may be the only thing that he had. They took his outer garments and made 4 parts. Now, you had outer garments. You had a headpiece. You had some kind of head covering. You had sandals. That's 2. You had a girdle of some sort, of belt, sash, if you will. You had an outer robe, and you had an inner tunic. So there's 5 pieces in all. And so they have the outer garments, the inner garments, and they're divvying them up. There's 4 guys, and there's 5 pieces, a part to every soul. All right, so sandals to you, headpiece to you, robe to you, part to every soldier, and also the tunic. Now, they have a challenge with the tunic because it's a fancy tunic. This is not just any old tunic that they can just divvy up, or this is a seamless tunic. It's expensive, woven in one piece. And so they decide to have crap game. It may have been dice. It may have been once, twice, 3, shoot, a finger game, who's got the higher finger. But nonetheless, they gamble. And so they said to one another, verse 24, let us not tear it, because it's expensive. It's actually worth something. It'll be worth less if we tear it up. But let's cast lots for it to decide who it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture. They divided my outer garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Now, this is indeed a fulfillment of Messianic prophecy. And I'll just give you a sense of the context of that Messianic prophecy, Psalm 22. And we're just going to pick it up a few verses before the prophecy dealing with the casting lots for the clothing. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. That indeed would have occurred when Yeshua, nailed to the cross piece, was lifted up. The cross piece was inserted onto the pole, right? And you would go ba-boom, and bones would indeed be shaken out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. Indeed, pulmonary arrest is part of crucifixion. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue cleaves to my jaws, which is why he says later, I thirst, and you lay me in the dust of death. Dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers have encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me, and here is the prophetic passage. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. These are real Roman dice from Second Temple time, from roughly the first, maybe second century. This looks like something you get out of an old Monopoly game today. This really bone dice that the Roman soldiers would have used. You could have your own game of Yahtzee with these dice. And in fact, on the lithostratus, on the pavement that is part of the Via Dolorosa, it actually dates from about 100 years later than the crucifixion, but we have this Roman pavement that was laid down during the time of Hadrian, and you see carved out is a little game board where the Roman soldiers would play, likely not going back to the time of Yeshua, but 100 years later. Verse 25, therefore the soldiers did these things. Now, we had these 4 soldiers. We see what they're doing. They're taking Yeshua's clothing and carving him up, divvying him up amongst themselves. Now, in contrast to the activity of these 4 soldiers, John points out that there are 4 women who are there, 4 disciples of Yeshua, female disciples. Now, the very fact, I want you to understand, before we even get into these ladies who are standing there, I want you to understand that the fact that we have John pointing out that there are 4 disciples there, and they're female, and they're boldly standing there identifying with Yeshua's suffering, that is an extraordinary act of courage and fortitude that we don't normally see in ancient literature. But the fact that John highlights that these women, and it's not like we see 4 of the disciples, who were there, the guys, the apostles, they're not there. We have one apostle who's there, we'll meet in a second. But we have 4 women there, indicates that what you would expect to see 4 guys, because they're brave and strong and they would be there with Jesus, right? No, it's the women who have the courage. And that should, I would think that would be very encouraging for every female follower of Yeshua for the next 2 millennia, that you stand in good stock. So now, standing by the cross of Yeshua were his mother. We got 4 women. And his mother's sister. Neither of them are named. Remember Mary, Jesus' mother. We met her back in chapter 2 with the water to wine, but her name was not given at the time. Her name, her name is assumed. And his mother's sister, in other words, Yeshua's aunt. And then Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. 4 ladies. Now, who are these 4 women? Now, we know, of course, the first one, Yeshua's mother, Mary, is there. And the second woman, Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is mentioned. Every one of the Gospels tells us that there were women there. And some don't name them, but every time the women are named, Mary Magdalene's name comes up. So we know for sure she's one of the women. Now, it's quite possible that there is a whole gaggle of women. There's a whole group of them. There might be 10, 12 of them. And to coordinate between the various different lists that are given in the Gospels is folly. But I think actually there were 4. And certain Gospels give us certain identity. We put them all together, and we can identify who these 4 women are. So again, Yeshua's mom, and then Mary Magdalene, and then lady number 3 and lady number 4. Lady number 3 is Mary, the wife of Clopas, Mrs. Clopas. Now, she is identified in Mark and in Matthew as the mother of James the Less and Joseph, disciples of Yeshua. And then we have the 4th woman, and she's interesting to me. Salome is her name. And who is Salome? She's Mrs. Zebedee, the mother of James and John. And she is the sister of Mary, the sister of Yeshua's mother. That makes Salome, this woman, Yeshua's aunt. She's mentioned by name Matthew 27 and Mark 15. And so that would make, if Salome, the mother of James and John, is Yeshua's aunt, that makes James and John Yeshua's first cousins. People don't talk about that, but if you actually do the study, and there aren't more than just the 4, then that's the conclusion that you must come to. And that makes sense considering what we're going to encounter. When Jesus then saw his mother in this next passage, and the disciple whom he loved, who was the disciple whom he loved? It is John, ostensibly his cousin, standing by. He said to his mother, woman, same word that he used in John chapter 2, woman, what have I to do with you? Woman, behold your son. Speaking not of, behold your son, take a look at me. Aren't I in an awful state right now? No, he's indicating the disciple whom he loved and saying, woman, behold your son, i.e. John. And then he said to the disciple, John, whom he loved, the one who wrote this gospel, behold your mother. What's happening here? A dying man is who is the head of the household. The father, obviously, Joseph is dead by this time, and Jesus, as the eldest, had been the one responsible for the care of the mother. But he is now no longer going to be able to take care of her, obviously, and so he is legally transferring the authority, the responsibility of caring for his mother to another family member. Why not his brothers? He has James, he has other brothers. Well, they are not at this point, they are not believers, and they are not there, so he transfers the authority to John, his disciple. Behold your mother. From that hour, from that moment, from that time, that disciple, John, took her, Mary, Jesus' mother, into his own household. And from what we know about church history, the two are connected from that point on. Where John goes, Mary is, etc., etc. He is she is part of his household. He's responsible for her. So when we see Yeshua's final 7 statements between the Gospels, we see of the 7, we see 3 of the final 7 statements are actually included in the book of John. 3 others are included in the book of Luke, and then Matthew and Mark all give just one line. And so if we go right through them, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. That is Luke. And today, speaking to the insurrectionist next to him, today you shall be with me in paradise. And then we get this one that we just saw, when we behold your son, behold your mother. Then Matthew and Mark recall Psalm 122, or Psalm rather 22, that same psalm that we just read a portion of. It begins with verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then the 5th statement we find in John, the 6th statement in John, I'm thirsty, it is finished. And then Luke again, the 7th statement, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Why doesn't each gospel include every single line? Well, because 4 different guys are telling the story. And so they're each going to give you that which they think are the most important. This is not a step-by-step stenographic account of everything that Jesus said, moment by moment, inch by inch, hour by hour, minute by minute. These are given to help us understand the point of the thrust of the gospel. So, verse 28, after this, Yeshua, knowing that all things had already been accomplished. Now, this is an important line in John. Not only in this section here, between 28 and 30, the idea of everything that Yeshua had been sent to do by this point has been accomplished, has been completed, has been fulfilled. So we have this teleos in the perfect, which means completed action, tetelestai. It has been accomplished. Another form of that word, fulfilled. All things have been accomplished. To fulfill, using basically the same word, to fulfill the scripture, Yeshua said, I am thirsty. I thirst. And this is a reference to Psalm 69, verses 19 through 21. You know my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. All my adversaries are before you. Reproach has broken my heart, and I am sick. And I looked for sympathy, but there was none. And for comforters, but I found none. And here we are. And they gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst, Yeshua says, I am thirsty. They gave me vinegar, which is basically sour wine. If you leave a wine bottle, open wine bottle in your refrigerator long enough, it will, no matter how good the vintage, it will eventually turn to vinegar. It will become sour wine. For my thirst, they gave me vinegar to drink. And Psalm 69 is like one of John's go-to psalms. And we've seen it already twice before in the gospel, back in chapter 2, with the temple. Disciples remembered it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. And another quotation from Psalm 69 from John 15. But they have done this to fulfill the word that was written in their law. They hated me without a cause. So it's one of those corresponding psalms that describe a situation that Yeshua finds himself in. But when we talk about accomplished, what is accomplished here? When Yeshua sees that all has been accomplished, we remember John 3. Not John 3:16, but John 3:17. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Why was Yeshua sent? To save the world. It is accomplished through his sacrifice on the cross. Amen is right. We see the same word here, accomplish, in John 4. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him, way back in the beginning. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. So we look forward, back when reading chapter 4, that eventually Yeshua is going to accomplish his work and do what God has sent him to do, what his Father sent him to do. Yeshua on the cross says, it is accomplished. In John 5, for the works which the Father has given me to accomplish, same word, the very works that I do testify about me that the Father has sent me. So we always know from the very beginning that Yeshua is task-oriented. He's got a job, he's got a mission, and he needs to accomplish that mission. And mission accepted, mission complete, mission accomplished on the cross. And that final prayer that he gives in John 17, I glorified you on the earth, having accomplished the work which you have given me to do. It's one of those theme words that carry through the Gospel of John. And so he says, I'm thirsty, because he's got one more thing to say, and he wants to make sure that while his tongue is cleaving to his roof, he's completely dry on the edge of death, that he has enough moisture to be able to be heard, because what he's going to say is very important. And a jar full of sour wine, that's that vinegar, was standing there. That's the drink. The sour wine mixed with water, that was the drink of the laborer. It was the drink of the soldiers. And so they would have had some, so they give him some. They put a sponge full of the sour wine upon a branch of hyssop, and they brought it to his mouth. This is not the myrrh that other Gospels speak of, that Yeshua refuses, which is a narcotic to dull the pain. This has nothing to do with dulling the pain. This actually would theoretically would prolong his suffering by giving him some more moisture in his mouth. But they give him the sour wine, and therefore, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And this last, it's not a statement. It's not a clause. It's not a phrase. It's actually one word. I've already shared it. It's this teleo in the perfect tense, in the accomplished tense, and the action accomplished with future ramifications. And that word, it is finished, one word, tetelestai. Tetelestai. It is finished. What is finished? What Yeshua had come to accomplish. The ultimate goal of why Yeshua came, to die on our behalf, to shed his blood on our behalf, is now finished. Perfect tense of fulfill, accomplish. It has been accomplished. Past action, future result. Another use of the word tetelestai. You can actually look this word up on the internet. It's very interesting images. I was amazed at how many people, especially young people, have tattooed the word tetelestai on their bodies to remind them that the work of Messiah is indeed finished. And there's another sense in which tetelestai is used. Not just that the work of Messiah is finished and accomplished and completed, but it also was used in ancient days for receipts to indicate paid in full. Tetelestai. There is nothing more that is owed. Every debt that we have, that we owe to our Lord, our Father, our God, has been paid in full by our Messiah. Why? Because his work is finished. And his final word in the Gospel of John, and actually any of the other Gospels, you only have Luke, into your hands I commit my spirit. So which one came first? I tend to actually think that into my hands I commit my spirit came first, and then the final statement, but we can argue about that, doesn't matter. They're close on each other's heels. It is finished is what John wants you to understand. There is nothing more to do regarding your salvation but to believe that it is finished and that your debts have been tetelestai, paid in full. And so as we think of the completed work of our Messiah, we remember back in John chapter 3 that he told us the significance of what was going to happen to him and what he intended to accomplish. And he did. It's like every great action, every great sermon, every great speech that you ever hear. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's what we see here in John. As Moses lifted up the servant in the wilderness, so even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that whoever believes in him, the crucified one, the lifted up one, will have eternal life. And I, John 12:32, and I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. So again, the same questions that we asked last week, I ask again. Yeshua sacrificed his life for you. What are you doing with that truth? Is that truth coloring your actions each day? Your attitudes, your feelings, your identity? What are you doing with that truth? Are you doing enough with the truth that Yeshua died for you that you can tell someone what it is you're doing with that truth? And when was the last time you opened your Bible